I'll tell you the truth the way it happened, without dressing it up to make me look braver than I was. I sat there with a smile that hurt my cheeks, while my coworkers ordered like they were shopping with a stolen credit card, and I let them do it, because that's what I'd been trained to do. By them, by the job, and by a part of me that thought keeping the peace was the same thing as being respected. It started small months ago, the first time Brandon, my manager with the loudest voice on the floor, tossed a black leather check presenter toward me and said, "Our numbers guy will square it up. He likes that stuff." People laughed. Mia did the exaggerated gasp she does when she wants attention. Cole rolled his eyes in that way that says he's above all of it, even as he benefits. I paid because we'd closed a project early and I'd gotten a bonus, and nobody asked me to. Not really. The check just slid toward me like a magnet had been hidden under the table. I told myself it was team building. I told myself I didn't want to be the guy who makes a scene over money. Then once became sometimes, sometimes became usually, and usually grew teeth. Tonight was Marino's, a place with chandeliers that looked like they dripped champagne and a wine list thicker than our HR manual. We were 7 people in a corner booth that could have seated 5, elbows brushing, perfume and cologne drifting, laughter sharpened by hunger and expectation. Brandon thumped down like a conquering hero and announced he'd been dying for their tomahawk steak, a cut so big the menu had the price in tiny font, like the restaurant was embarrassed on its own behalf. Mia said she'd been good this week and deserved the lobster pasta with extra lobster. And when the server said, "That'd be a surcharge," she smiled at me as if I were the one who'd asked for more animal. Cole went for the tasting flight of scotches he couldn't pronounce and winked at the server to cover it. Even the interns got brave, asking if it was cool to try the oysters because you only live once, which is exactly the kind of sentence people say right before someone else pays their bills. I ordered the cedar plank salmon and water. Brandon looked at my glass and said, "You cutting back, big guy?" I'm not big, for the record. I'm medium in every way. Height, voice, footprint. Unless you're measuring patience. I told him I was fine. He raised his glass anyway. To our sponsor, he said it like a joke that had been told too many times to be funny, but too many times to be fought. The server laughed because people learn fast who's going to tip and who's going to test them. I watched the table the way I read spreadsheets, quietly looking for movement more than noise. Mia rehearsed stories with her hands, counting invisible points on invisible fingers. Cole kept checking the room for someone more important to be seen with. Brandon's watch flashed every time he gestured. He gestured a lot. Around us, the restaurant hummed at a volume that made you feel like your life was happening in the center of something valuable. That's what places like this sell you first. The feeling that the room itself costs money, and just breathing in it is a privilege. By the time bread baskets had become breadcrumbs, the jokes had started. "Ethan's got the miles," Brandon said, as if frequent flyer programs were a charity. "Finance guy," Mia chimed, sing-songing the words like they absolved her. "Tax write-off." Cole asked if we should order another bottle while our boy was here. The interns tried to laugh without looking at me. I took a sip of tap water that tasted like it had been filtered through expensive ice and counted the ways I had let this happen. 1. I believed if I didn't make money awkward, maybe people would treat me like more than a calculator with shoes. 2. I thought the word team meant something outside a PowerPoint slide. 3. The thin, needy part of me liked being useful. The food arrived like a parade. 2 servers balancing plates, synchronized like they'd trained for this. Brandon's steak came on a board with a bone I swear you could play as a trumpet. Mia's pasta gleamed. Cole told the intern to film the flambe at the next table because clients love a vibe. The intern obliged, and the fire reflected off the glassware and off Mia's pupils and off the part of me that had been quietly going numb. I don't hate my coworkers. Hate would be simple. What I felt was a colder thing, like being stuck holding a door for people who don't look at you when they pass. It wasn't just the jokes. It was the slippage. The assumption. The way Brandon never said please to the server. The way Mia's smile warmed only when she could see a camera. The way Cole's hands were always empty when there was something heavy to carry. I remembered each time I'd lifted a bill without protest and how they had turned those moments into a tradition. Traditions are just habits with costumes. The server came back to ask about dessert, and Brandon clapped his hands again, the way you clap at a dog that's done something clever. "Baked Alaska," he decreed, "for the table." Mia's eyes slid to me, checking the weather. Cole chuckled. The interns nodded because nodding costs less than dissent. I checked my phone under the table. The time. The message I'd typed earlier, left unsent. It sat there like a loaded word. I locked the screen and placed the phone face down. I told myself I would get through the night without bleeding out on the white tablecloth. "Ethan," Brandon said, elbows wide, voice warm enough to look like kindness from a distance. "Tell them about that budget hack you pulled on the Henderson account. Genius." I tried to tell it briefly, without numbers, but numbers are how I think, and they got away from me. By the time I finished, Mia was scrolling her feed, and Cole had found a sports score, and Brandon was nodding because nodding is a kind of punctuation. One intern asked to follow up, and I thanked him like he'd handed me a glass of water in a desert. Later, when the baked Alaska arrived and the server lit it, I thought about how pretty flames are when they are contained, and how expensive it is when they're not. The check didn't arrive. It floated. It was already in the air, metaphysically, glowing faintly, orbiting the table in slow circles. I could feel it before I saw it, the way a storm changes the pressure in your ears. When the server finally set the leather folder down between the salt and pepper, Mia's hand touched it lightly, playfully, and pushed it toward me, a gesture so practiced it had the grace of muscle memory. "Our sponsor," she repeated. Brandon made a drum roll with his fingers on the table. Cole said, "You're the man," in a tone that dissolved any meaning those words might hold. Under the table, my right hand flexed until the knuckles ached. It wasn't the money. I can afford food. It was the transaction that wasn't supposed to be a transaction. The exchange of dignity for belonging. The way you can spend yourself down to the lint and call it generosity. I pictured the spreadsheet I kept on my home computer, the line items I stopped adding to when the pattern became impossible to mislabel. I pictured my father's voice telling me, years ago, "Pick your battles, son," and the quiet, dangerous thought that arrived right after. What if I've never picked one at all? The server approached with a polite, professional smile. Brandon opened his mouth with a joke I already knew the beats to. I took a breath that tasted like cold sugar and expensive wine I hadn't drunk. I reached for the check presenter, not to slide my card inside, but because sometimes the person who touches the folder first is the person who gets to decide what happens next. I didn't speak right away. Their faces were expectant, relaxed in the confidence of a routine. In the reflection of the chandelier above us, I saw a small figure holding a small black book and realized it was me. I closed the folder gently, feeling the give of leather, the promise of paper, and I felt something in my chest click into place with the simplest sound in the world. A decision settling. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the money. I hadn't paid, not yet. But because of the silence that came after I decided I wouldn't. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like a storm gathering inside your ribs. When I got home, I hung my jacket, poured a glass of water, and stared at the spreadsheet on my laptop. The one labeled, Team Dinners, 2022-2025. Each row was a scar I'd kept track of, restaurant names, dates, totals, $186.45, $327.60, $512.9, all the way up to $947.10. Not once had anyone offered to split it. Not once had anyone said thank you. The last entry had no numbers yet. Just a date. Marino's, Friday, 7:30 p.m. I closed the file and sat in the dark, the glow of the screen cutting my reflection in half. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I just felt done. The next morning, the office smelled like burnt coffee and cheap ambition. Brandon was already holding court by the espresso machine, retelling last night like a war story. Man, Marino's was insane. Best steak of my life. Ethan, you really know how to treat a team. The others laughed, a chorus of approval for a joke I hadn't agreed to. I forced a smile and said nothing. I just watched him, his tie too bright, his teeth too white, and thought about how easy it is for certain people to take and never see it as taking. Mia swanned by my desk, mid-morning, latte in one hand, phone in the other. "Hey, sponsor," she said with a grin that didn't touch her eyes. "You good for next week's off-site dinner, too? Brandon says we're celebrating the client renewal." "Yeah," Cole added, spinning a pen between his fingers. "New place downtown, chef's table. They only take reservations if you pre-authorize a card." I looked up from my monitor, let the silence breathe, and said quietly, "Yeah, I'll handle it." And I did, just not the way they thought. By lunch, the plan had formed cleanly, the way numbers click into place when the formula finally works. I called Chef's Table, one of those minimalist glass and slate places where the napkins probably cost more than my weekly groceries. "Hi, this is Ethan Ward. I've got a reservation for 5 this Friday at 7. "Yes, Mr. Ward," the host said brightly. "We have you in our system. Would you like to confirm the prepayment details?" "Actually," I said, my voice calm, steady, the way I sound in budget meetings, "I need to make sure each guest receives a separate check. No group bill. No single card allowed to cover the table." A pause. Then the host laughed softly like he thought it was a joke. "I'm sorry, sir, but our policy—" "I know your policy," I interrupted, polite but firm. "That's why I'm calling ahead. I'll also email this instruction to your manager, so it's on record. I'll sign it if needed." He hesitated, then, "Understood, Mr. Ward. We'll note your request." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from nerves, but adrenaline. That quiet, electric current of finally doing something after years of swallowing everything. I spent the afternoon working as usual, but every keystroke felt charged. Brandon strutted around, slapping shoulders. Mia giggled at her screen. Cole kept checking the group chat for memes. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient, and patience, when sharpened long enough, can cut through anything. Friday came fast. I arrived early at Chef's Table. Suit pressed, hair neat, expression neutral. The restaurant glowed in the dusk. Tall windows, gold light, expensive hush. The host recognized me immediately. "Mr. Ward," she said, smiling. "Everything is set as per your instructions." "Perfect," I said, and handed her a $50 bill. "For your time. Just make sure the bills go to each person separately when the meal ends." She nodded, eyes wide. "Of course." When the others arrived, Brandon was already loud before he sat down. "My man," he boomed, clapping me on the back. "You booked this place? Heard it's impossible to get in." "It wasn't too hard," I said, smiling. "I just called ahead." Mia slid into her seat, glittering in a dress that didn't belong in an office setting. "God, Ethan, you're spoiling us." "Again!" Cole grinned. "We really should get you a corporate sponsor mug." The waiter appeared with menus. The prices were obscene, which was exactly the point. Brandon didn't even glance at them before ordering the premium tasting menu. "Whatever's top shelf for drinks, too," he said. "Tonight's on Ethan?" I didn't correct him. Not yet. Instead, I watched. I watched them laugh, toast, call me buddy, legend, finance guy. I watched them take selfies and tag the restaurant like it was a badge of success. And somewhere between the appetizers and the third glass of wine, something inside me relaxed, because I knew what was coming. By the time dessert arrived, the table was a wreck of laughter, half-finished plates, and careless arrogance. Brandon was bragging about a golf membership he'd negotiated through a client. Mia was complaining about interns. Cole was mimicking our regional director's accent. And me? I was silent, calm, counting. In my head, I added the totals as if they were just cells on a spreadsheet. $180 steak, $90 wine, $65 dessert. Multiply by 4. Add tax, add service. Just under $1,000. When the waiter finally returned with 5 neat folders, Brandon grinned, already reaching for mine. "Let me guess," he said. "All one bill?" The waiter smiled politely. "Actually, sir, per Mr. Ward's instructions, all bills are individual." The silence hit like a slap. 5 faces froze mid-laugh. Brandon blinked. "Wait, what?" The waiter repeated it, unbothered. "Individual bills. No combined payment allowed." Mia's fork clattered against her plate. "You're kidding, right, Ethan?" I shrugged. Just thought it'd be fair this time. Cole gave a weak laugh. "You serious?" I didn't answer. The waiter began setting the receipts down one by one. Brandon stared at his $312.45 before tip. His jaw worked. "You could have said something." "I could have," I said softly. "But you never asked." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Brandon shoved his chair back, muttering something about unprofessional. Mia fumbled for her card, her face pale. Cole stared at the numbers like they were in a foreign language. I watched them struggle, just as I'd struggled for months, trapped between pride and pressure. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. I stood, slipped my card into my own folder, and handed it to the waiter. "Keep the change," I said. "They'll handle theirs." Brandon looked up, fury and humiliation mixing in his expression. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" "No," I said. "Just someone who finally paid for himself." I left before they could answer, the sound of the restaurant fading behind me, replaced by the quiet click of my shoes on the pavement. Outside, the night air felt sharp and clean. I pulled out my phone and opened a draft email addressed to HR compliance. Subject line, "Expense misuse, internal team meals." I stared at it for a moment, my thumb hovering over the send button. Then I smiled, not cruelly, but with the calm of someone who's finally beautifully done pretending. I hit send. The email was short, barely 2 paragraphs. But when I hit send, it felt like detonating something I'd been building for months. No drama, no name-calling, just a timestamp, receipts, and a single line that said, "Repeated misuse of team expense claims under my name without authorization." That was Friday night. By Monday morning, it was a war zone. When I walked into the office, the air had that strange tension you only feel when gossip and fear are both fresh. Everyone was whispering, not quietly enough. Brandon's door, usually propped open to show off his dominance, was shut tight. Through the frosted glass, I could make out his silhouette pacing like a caged animal. Cole was at his desk, pale, staring into his monitor as if the numbers could save him. Mia sat 2 rows over, tapping her acrylic nails against the desk, a nervous rhythm she'd never had before. And me? I poured a coffee, calm, measured. I even whistled. Marie from accounting leaned over her cubicle wall. "Hey, did you hear?" Compliance pulled Brandon and Mia into HR at 9 sharp. I feigned surprise. "Really?" "Must be about those client expenses." She gave me a look that said she suspected more. "You're not involved in that, are you?" I smiled. Just the guy who files his receipts properly. At 9:15, Brandon's voice boomed down the hallway, a mixture of outrage and desperation. "You're telling me one email is enough to suspend an entire department's expense privileges? Are you serious?" The HR director's voice was low but sharp. "We're not suspending the department, Brandon. We're auditing it. And your authorization history is concerning." The blinds on the glass office flickered as someone shifted inside. Then the door opened. Brandon stormed out, face flushed, tie askew. He brushed past me without a word, but I caught the brief moment his eyes met mine. He knew. He just didn't know how much I knew. 2 hours later, an email hit everyone's inbox. Subject: temporary suspension of expense accounts. Project Athena team. The body was polite, sterile, corporate. As part of an internal compliance review, all expense privileges for the Athena project are paused pending further notice. Please direct all inquiries to HR. The office exploded in whispers. Cole dropped his pen. Mia slammed her laptop shut. muttering something about overreactions and witch hunts. Brandon disappeared completely. I sat there, sipping my coffee, the quiet satisfaction settling in like a long exhale after years of holding my breath. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was math. Actions, consequences, debits, credits. Everything balancing out in the end. By lunchtime, HR called me in. The director, a calm woman named Lisa, gestured for me to sit. "Ethan, we've reviewed your report and compared it with our expense logs. You were right to come forward. The records show consistent misuse of your name for payments that were not company approved." I nodded, playing the role of the reasonable employee. I didn't want to make trouble, but it was getting out of hand. She gave a small smile. "You did the right thing. Integrity matters, especially in finance." There was a pause. "Between us, your manager won't be returning this week, possibly not at all." Something inside me shifted. Not joy, not guilt, just release. Years of biting my tongue, smoothing over awkward silences, pretending their jokes didn't sting. It all unspooled at once, leaving behind a strange, clean emptiness. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I just wanted it to stop." Lisa nodded. "It has." The rest of the day played out like a slow, silent movie. Mia avoided my gaze completely, packing her things into a designer tote she could no longer justify as business relevant. Cole muttered about HR overreach, but never raised his eyes. By 5, the office felt hollow, like a stage after the actors had left. As I walked out, Marie caught up with me by the elevator. "Hey," she said softly. "Whatever you did, it needed to happen. People noticed." "People?" I asked. "Yeah, the right ones." She smiled, the elevator dinged, and I stepped in. That night, I drove home in silence, city lights bleeding across the windshield. For the first time in months, I didn't replay the day's conversations in my head, didn't second-guess myself, didn't wonder if I'd gone too far. I stopped by a small diner 2 blocks from my apartment, the kind of place where the menus are laminated and the coffee refills never stop. The waitress, older, kind eyes, asked, "Table for one?" "Yeah," I said, "just one." I ordered a burger, fries, and black coffee. $18.75, tip included. When the bill came, I paid in cash and left before she could bring change. Walking to my car, I passed a group of coworkers from another firm, loud, laughing, one of them joking about whose turn it was to pay. I smiled, not unkindly, because they didn't know the truth yet, the truth I'd learned too late. Some debts aren't written on paper. They're written in the moments you let people mistake your kindness for weakness, and every kindness has an interest rate. By the time I got home, the first HR memo had gone company-wide. Brandon, terminated. Mia, suspended pending investigation. Cole, written warning and financial restitution. The final line of the memo read, "We appreciate Mr. Ward for bringing these irregularities to light." I stared at it for a long time, the glow of the laptop screen painting the room in blue. Then I closed it, leaned back, and whispered, "Balance achieved." Tomorrow they'd all know. But tonight, for the first time in years, I slept like someone who didn't owe anyone a damn thing. The email had gone out company-wide by morning. It didn't just announce terminations. It rewrote the hierarchy of the entire floor. Brandon's name was gone from the leadership roster. Mia's desk sat empty, except for the dying violet she used to water during client calls. Cole returned quieter, stripped of his usual swagger. And me? I walked in with my coffee like nothing had changed, but everyone looked up. The silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was different, respectful. HR moved fast. Within a week, I'd been formally commended for ethical diligence. A month later, promoted to senior financial analyst. Brandon's old office, same corner view, no trace of his cologne or ego left behind. It should have felt triumphant, but revenge doesn't taste sweet. It tastes clean, like antiseptic, like fresh air in a room that had been closed for too long, and that's enough. Still, there's an ache that comes after silence, when the noise that used to fill your days is gone and you start hearing yourself again. That Friday, Marie leaned in through my doorway. "We're grabbing dinner to celebrate the quarter close. You in?" She said it lightly, carefully, like someone testing a door they're not sure will open. "Yeah," I said. "Sure, as long as everyone's paying for themselves." She grinned. "Deal." The restaurant was small, a neighborhood spot with handwritten menus and soft jazz instead of status. The entire team came, splitting bills without a fuss. No jokes, no passive expectation. When the check arrived, it scattered across the table like playing cards, everyone reaching for their own. It was such a small gesture, but it felt monumental. Equality, not generosity. Respect, not performance. Later that night, I walked home under the amber streetlights, the city humming in the background. My phone buzzed with a new email. Subject: meeting request, Ethics Council. It was from the regional director. They wanted me to help develop new guidelines for expense accountability. I laughed quietly to myself. The man who once paid everyone's bill was now rewriting the rules for who pays what. Funny how balance works when you stop apologizing for asking for it. Saturday morning, I let the day start slow. No alarms, no suits. I walked to the corner cafe, the one with cracked mugs and the smell of burnt toast, and ordered black coffee and a blueberry muffin. $9.85. Paid cash. Sat by the window while rain began to streak the glass. Across the street, a group of office workers crowded outside a brunch spot, laughing too loud, waving their credit cards around. For a moment, I saw myself in them, the one smiling too hard, pretending not to notice the bill sliding closer, but that version of me was gone. The waitress refilled my cup without asking. "You look like you finally got some rest," she said. "Yeah," I said. "I did," she smiled. "Good for you. That's rare these days." I watched the rain gather into streams down the window, soft and rhythmic. My reflection was calmer than I remembered. Not victorious, not bitter, just balanced. People always say revenge is about making others pay. They're wrong. It's about closing the account you've been keeping open too long, with interest you never agreed to charge. I finished my coffee, left a tip big enough to mean something, but small enough to stay honest, and stepped back into the rain. For the first time in years, the weight I carried wasn't a debt. It was freedom,